All right. Welcome to the February 2026 meeting of Palomar Amateur Radio Club. We'll get started with, as we usually do, with the pledge. So all rise, please remove your covers and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Play ball. Everybody says that, but it's the anthem before a ball game, not the pledge. Whatever. If I was gonna offer, if anybody wanted to, but we'll talk about that another time. No. Oh, are you volunteering, Doug? Pitch. Nice. Okay. All right, so we'll get things started. Anybody first time visitor here this morning? Yes, sir. Name, call sign, and location. You just stand right there. Andy, you said?
I've been at Ham since 1968.
Great.
San Diego and Carmel Valley area.
Okay, so Andy, WB6, UPW. Welcome. Fantastic. Thanks for finding us. Oh, someone getting donuts and coffee? We'll address them in a minute. Anybody else? Okay, how about brand new Ham, just got your license, or license upgrades? Not you. Got a bunch of comedians in the room. Okay. Sir, you're new? What's your name, call sign, and location? Riddell. Okay. We can help you get your license back. Fantastic. Right. Okay. Do you know do you remember your call sign? Is it still available? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we'll look forward to hearing you say new Ham again in a couple of months. All right. Fantastic. And everybody found their way here. Fantastic. Nobody's lost that we know of. We are in this space for how long? Next? Okay, so we're just here for this month, for one more month, and we should be back over in the community center in April. So I don't know. We can definitely invest. It's the same price. So acoustics are better here. Yeah, maybe. Just means we have to bring our own sound system. But, Glenn, that's what Glenn's for. Although between Glenn and Mark and myself, we've got a bunch of sound systems. So, all right. I mean, we can address that definitely over the next month and see what we think about the two spaces. And if there's conflicts with other groups being in here or whatever. So yeah, we can look at that. But yeah, okay. Membership. Oh, sorry. Since this is a new space, I'm supposed to tell you emergency exits are there. In case of a sudden loss in cabin pressure, oxygen masks will not drop from the ceiling. Just walk outside. Restrooms are right behind our flag. So if you need to go to the restroom in the middle of the presentation, everybody will know exactly where you're going and why. All right, Blair.
So sometimes, we're all volunteers, and so sometimes things don't get done as quickly as I'd like to do them. I sat down a few days ago, and I think I put in 16 or 17 recorded payments, and I think it was one new member, and I did the same thing today with, I think, 5, including one new member, and I didn't write down what his call sign was. Anyway, we currently have 146 members, so it's gone up about 3 since last meeting.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. Always nice to hear the increasing numbers. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell young people, if you know any scouts, get them interested. And remember, we have that program where if a scout earns their radio merit badge and their FCC call sign, we will give them an HT and the the amateur radio operator strip to go on their uniform. All right. Let's do site. And then we'll do tech and you can roll right into tech corner. Sound good? All right.
Everybody having a good time? We'll soon change that. Chris Baldwin here, KF2G. I am your repeater site, whatever. Chairman, there you go. I don't know if we announced at the last meeting. I think we'd worked on it afterwards. We did some work up at the site that involved fixing the Meshtastic node that I will accept full responsibility for maliciously vandalizing. And we also replaced the antenna on the low band repeater, 5268 6-meter box. So that's coming along. We have some structural projects up there related to siding and whatnot that need some attention, as well as tree trimming and mulching and just general site upkeep stuff. So I know some of you probably got an email from me and we're given the option to either dismiss it, which is okay, nothing wrong there, or reply and stay on the list. But if you are interested in getting involved in site maintenance up there, you do it as you're able to. Try and get it done on the weekends. Sometimes the guys go up during the week, but we could definitely use a hand with that stuff. So if you're interested, please let me know or drop me an email. It's kf6ajm@aol.com. Come talk to me. I'll write it down for you, and we could use the help with that. So I'll give it over to Mark for Tech Corner and the club technical chairman there, and he can probably give you an update on modernization, or unless that's Glenn, I'm not sure who's taking that one. Anyway, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming out tonight. Did anybody hear me yelling and screaming on the repeater this morning or this evening to come out to the meeting? Did anybody hear that? The QST? But turn your radios on. Turn your radios on, people. Shame on each one of you. Turn them on. Anyway, thanks for coming out tonight.
Wow, how do you follow that? As Glenn can tell you with regard, I'll start with not modernization. I am still in search of the little birds that are hiding somewhere in the RF inside the ham shack associated with one of the switching power supplies is getting noisy. And Bruno, I deserve it. It's okay. You yelled at me. I'm going to go back and see if I can chase down those little birdies this Saturday. Yeah, I see a little head going up and down. So I'll try and chase them this Saturday. Also, the relay board for turning the flex on and off is in place. So we got to work on that. And then poor Glenn, if you guys want to come out and work, I have a really nice SDS Max rotary hammer because we grouted the base of the tower into this, how many 1,000-pound? It was 2 cement mixers almost full, about 48,000 pounds of concrete. And we grouted it all together, and Glenn called for the final inspection, and the lady goes, "Oh, you didn't have an inspector present for your grouting. You fail." So now we got to dig all the grout out. So we'll be up there with a big rotary drill, cutting the grout out if anyone wants to come help this Saturday morning. If anybody does, we're going to meet at Mother's Kitchen on Canfield Road at 10 a.m. and then convoy over. Let me see. Last but not least, to keep things moving. Is that everything for modernization, Glenn? Okay. I am supposed to do something called Tech Corner, which we have reintroduced.
Presentation being shared.
All right. Oh, this is a really tight pattern microphone.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. You got to be right in front of it. When you're off to the side is no good. So they asked me to do presentations, technical presentations, 5 minutes or less before the normal presentation. But tonight is a special thing because Dennis has been our unofficial club historian for, yeah, right. No, you're in here. For how many years have you been doing this without any recognition or anything? It's got to be 15, maybe. You don't remember? It's really nice when your historian can't remember things. Oh, you wrote it all down. Okay. All right. Anyway. So mine is pretty straightforward. In 5 minutes or less, I got to do some technical presentation. Tonight, we had a request for a detailed, starting with molecular physics and electron interactions of how transistors work. I can't do that in 5 minutes. I tried. So this is plan B. This is a lecture that I had on A to D converters. Everybody knows, they've heard of A to D converters. How many people have not heard of an A to D converter? That's what I thought. Okay, it takes analog signals, converts them to digital so that people like Phil back there on his PC can then write all sorts of nifty little algorithms for digital filtering, frequency selection, decoding, all sorts of interesting things. But it all starts with an A to D converter and how good of a job can you do getting this voltage change into a digital value. And let me see. Oh, it worked. This is probably the best slide in this whole thing because it explains all the types of errors that you can get when you're trying to convert a pure audio, you know, the audiophiles love this, a pure digital or analog signal into digital. The first obvious one is right here. If you only have the ability to sample on these heavy lines, then if the analog signal is here when you sample it, it gives you that value, which is the closest that it can get, but not correct. That's called quantization error. Another one is when you're sampling, you sample at specific times, and you may not catch the bottom of a waveform, or in this case, you didn't quite catch the top of the waveform. So the sampling period can also be a source of error. And those are the two main ones that you have. I mean, there's others, but those are the two main ones that you have to deal with. You have to deal with not being able to sample as fast as you'd like and quantization. Now, think about something. Everybody's probably heard of something called Nyquist frequency, which says you got to sample twice the speed of what you're trying to capture. But part of my grad work was in Nyquist, and what you don't realize is it's double the speed, assuming an infinite number of bits of resolution. So all of you guys with 24-bit converters that think you're doing well, no, that's not what Nyquist said. So you need to understand that double sampling. So here's the thing. Think of you sampling at almost the exact same speed of a sinusoid. Almost, so you're going to get a sample there every time. So if you look at all of your samples and the sinusoid is about the same frequency, what you're going to see is a DC voltage right here, because you're only going to sample in the same spot every single time. You have no idea whether there's a waveform there or not. And then there's a whole bunch of other nifty things about folding back and getting multiples of frequencies. All right, so this is the best chart, so that's why we stayed here so long. All right, so probably don't need to read that for everybody. This is very simple. What? 1 minute? Okay. So we're probably not going to get through the same flash converters, which aren't used much anymore. I developed a frame grabber for video back in the late 1970s, and we used a flash converter. What that is it's 256 comparators. And the voltage level just triggers, you just read the top one and that's all there is to it. Thing got hotter than blue blazes. It was made by TRW. Successive approximation, delta sigma and pipelined. And I'll just let you guys read these because I've only got a few seconds left. Really, nobody uses flash converters. A lot of people use successive approximation still. By the way, a lot of this stuff is directly out of Wikipedia if you want to go look it up later. Everybody done? Yep, I'm getting the back. Delta sigma, those are very popular. You just you oversample the signals by a large factor and then you filter it back to what you need. Pipeline is, I've done a few things very, very fast with pipeline converters, but fidgety. You gotta, and you gotta be careful because the data that you read out is what came into the front of the converter a few conversions back. No questions. You can talk to me after. Dennis, you got a sec? I was supposed to give it to you. You're on.
Thank you, Mark.
More than one person in here who wants to understand the interatomic reactions that are created when a transistor starts to conduct.
Yes. I'm going to share the screen.
Yeah, do your thing. It's going to be like 8 5-minute talks in a row, or maybe I'll do one whole presentation for now. Cool.
Smarter every day.
It's non-trivial.
We'll go that way.
If I don't destroy the computer here,
Just don't hang up on it that far. That's all I ask.
well, I'll just laying on top. Hello, I'm just going to read some comments that we had about our history here. You know, and basically started in 1930s. They were using 160 meters a lot. And that was one of the contributing factors actually getting the club to form. Let's see. Now you make me think. They first started communicating about how to start a club in about 1930. The club was actually formed by Fred Elser, who was an MIT graduate, in February 13th, 1936. It was the North San Diego County Radio Club. And it was part, I lost the other section it was at. Okay. The call sign W6NWG was originally given to Mel Bacon in June or July 1936. And it was also him that coined the "nothing works good."
And we use it today.
Still.
So,
They were around quite a while. They did have their first field day at Mount Soledad in 1936. It was kind of nice. It wasn't there, but hey. As early as 1939, up until I think when Mike left here about what, 15 years ago also, we had a member of the club that was actually at Palomar Observatory. The first member was W6NJD Ben. So it was kind of nice to have a little bit close association with the observatory up there.
it was nice. He had no battery backups, and he would run out and start the generator because he only had a 3-mile trip.
Yes. Okay, our first club repeater was at W6SO's basement. It was promptly stolen within the first couple of days. That was the start of getting more security started up on top of the hill. That was one of the first repeater we had up on top of the hill. It was down in Vista before that for a couple of years until they were able to get that location up there on top of the hill. They had a new standard repeater on the hill in 1974. Took many trips to get that operating properly. One of the things that was going on is it would have spurs. Couldn't figure out why it had spurs. They had a repeater tech up there from Motorola many times. Could not figure out what was going on. Let's see. The first license for the repeater was WR6 AII. It only took a year and a half to get. And we also got the W6 NWG for the club at that time. In 1975, the W6SO, who hosted the repeater up there, sold the property. The new lord allowed PARC to stay, but we had to build a new outbuilding up there. So that's how we got one of our first buildings up there. It got sold again later, rent doubled. So as a result, the repeater came off the mountain, stayed off until one of the members, Hood Lynn, W6 UCN, bought a nearby lot and allowed PARC to build a cement building on the corner of the lot. That was 1976. And that should be the property where we're at right now. I believe that the battery building now.
Yeah.
We did add another repeater up there. The 440 machine was added up in the same area. They got new antennas for the 673, 1976 also. Again, the repeater, the standard, it was a standard repeater on the 673. And then again, it was worked on several times by standard, including going to standard for them to try and figure out what was going on. And 1977, the repeater site owner requested the repeater off the site. So temporarily again went back to Vista, sitting at about 600 feet in Vista. They did finish building the block building in 77. And also in 77, they decided to buy a commercial repeater. So the standard repeater still had spurs. It worked on standard the third time. Out of 2 years that we had that standard repeater, we had less than 4 months use that was actually available. So they ordered a new micro repeater at the current cost of over $3,000 in 1977. 450 had a backup machine that put together. They even put a new roof on the repeater building that year. I don't know, Mark might know a little more about that. They kept checking on the spurs by the Motorola guys. So finally got identified in 1978 after several years. It wasn't the radio. It was an idea that the club put on there. The idea, an aftermarket item, was the one that gave the spurs. So whatever reason they take the radio, the idea stayed local. So there was no problem when it went back to the shop. So it took a while to do that. 1978, Hod sold the property. He moved to Texas. And the club started working on seeing how to buy the property. Somehow I lost track of a few things here. There we go. In 1983, so I've skipped a few years. All right. So we did have 27 original members when we did form the club, 1936. 1981, repeater licenses changed from the FCC, and it changed from the WR6 AII to W6 NWG. The WR6 AII expired and was not renewable. So that's when FCC changed from actual repeater licensing to general licensing for it, running through the trustees. In 1983, Friends of PARC, anonymous donors, stepped up with some money to buy the property on top of the hill. And it was an $18,000 loan, 5% for 20 years. This ended up being a loan by one of the members to get us the property. There was quite a few things that happened with that property up there and getting it. It started getting done, and then the owner died. Family started taking care of it. Family got to a point that, hey, we want to get rid of it. You guys have first choice, Palomar. And somehow the property went back from $18,000 to $9,000. And they made a quick deal to try and get that done. As a result of that, the club went through a fundraising process, and they encouraged all the members that they figured out if everyone put in approximately $100, give or take, whatever members could afford, that would retire the debt. And they did so within about 2 years. So that was a very strong idea that they did. Those guys remember Stan. He was the last member around that actually helped guide that purchase. Stan did a lot of things for us up on the hill. In 1983 also, the tower that we have on top of the hill for our radios was donated. Bob, WA6QQQ, says they originated from KOGO and KPRI down in San Diego. All we had to do was go pick it up, pretty much. So they allotted some money and ended up with 3 trips on a trailer from San Diego up to Valley Center, where they did some refurbishing of that, and then they took it up on top of the hill. To get it up on top of the hill, they had to dig a hole, and they got to the point, and Stan was up there, and they were getting ready to, and he started, oh, this dirt's really soft. So he started digging a 6 by 6 foot hole. And it was so soft, he kind of kept going and lost track of time and kept going down, going down. He got to a 6 foot part, but he was the only one there. The only one there in the bottom of a 6 foot hole was straight sides going down. And it's not like he could actually jump out of that. So what he ended up doing, his words are, he took that shovel, put it up top on across the corner, and had to pull himself out. So
Why do we have humanity up on the mountain now?
you should always have someone to help you in case you both get in trouble. At least you can try and get one to bail out the other. So it was 12 cubic yards of concrete on the base of that tower up there. And that was 70 feet at the time. They put another 10 foot to make 80 foot later on. And that's kind of like the highlights of things that I got right now that I put out there. 1986 is when they paid off the property. They did do some odd things, like they created those stamp pins. There's still some of those stamp pins laying around. That was actually a stamp that was issued by the U.S. Postal Service. The club decided to make some pins of that stamp, and they sold them as a fundraiser. So that's kind of like the main things for the early on. So if you want something better, I could do something better later.
Yeah.
In the meantime, enjoy your repeater work up there. A lot of people put some effort into it. We've had it for a long time. So 1973 and 76 or so that we've actually had the property for ourselves.
Thank you, Dan. So I originally said, hey, Dennis, can I talk to you for a minute? And can you put something together for next month? And he said, I got it right here. So, so thank you, Dennis, for having that. That's fantastic. A lot of information. I had heard that story about the hole and I forgot it. So that was nice to have that reminder. So thanks for that. All right. And now, all right, James, will you introduce our speaker?
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to announce that Mel will be giving a speech today, KS2G, on the basics of HF operating. And he was licensed in 1977, so he's been around for a while. He's been an amateur extra since 1981. And that's when you had to do code, I think, right? You had to know code, obviously. He's been active in numerous aspects of amateur radio, ranging from traffic handling to packet radio. And he has a modest station. A lot of DXers, they'll come up here and say, yeah, 3,000 watt amplifier. Oh, wait, 1,500 watts. That's all it's legal. 1,500 watt amplifier. But Mel's done all this. He's got DXCC 289 with a pretty modest setup at 100 watts. And he is a wonderful contester. And you can see his stuff in the different magazines. I forget the names of all the magazines, but he's certainly been listing all those and does very well from the second area. So Mel, thank you very much for speaking to us today and looking forward to the presentation.
Okay, well, thanks so much. My apologies for being a little late. There were some technical problems with Zoom. What else is new? Greetings from Long Island, New York, 25 miles east of Midtown Manhattan, and where it's a balmy 22 degrees this evening. We've had 10 days in a row where the average temperature didn't get above freezing. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all, and I hope we'll do you some good. Let me get this going here. And let's see, we got Zoom over here, and now we need my presentation. And let's see if I can get Zoom to share my screen. Hold on a second here. Gotta get this down over here, I think. And we go back to Zoom over here, and I think I'm allowed to share my screen over here. Share. Now, do you all see what I see on my screen, my title slide? Is that showing up right? Someone give me an okay on that? Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We got it.
Okay, we got it. All right. So, slideshow. Start from the beginning. And here we go. So I'm going to talk to you this evening about basics of HF operating. It's going to be like a lightning round on all of this stuff. We can talk about the bands, the modes, a little bit about propagation, on-air procedures, and using basic rig controls to get the most out of your HF transceiver. The thing about me is that, as was mentioned, I've been doing this for a long time. I started out as a novice at WA2SEL, and at that time, all of these dates that you see involved Morse. As a novice, it was given. This is before the formal system that we have now, but the novice exam was given by a higher class, a general or higher class operator, sort of by mail, and the exam was sent to the test proctor, I guess you'd call him, and he did the code. I did it in a Red Roof restaurant up in Hartford, Connecticut, with a friend of mine. So I've been doing this, and I've spent most of my time at HF. I spent a very long period of time as a short period of time as a technician, and I operated a lot of 2 meters and 440. But I always spent most of my time on HF. So I'm hoping that this presentation will provide useful information to all of you, no matter what your license class is, whether you're a novice or a tech, general, advanced, extra, whether you've never operated HF, operated HF every now and again, or operate HF a lot. I hope there'll be something here that you can take away from this presentation that will prove worthwhile. So without further ado, let's talk about what are the HF bands. They're 10 frequency ranges between 1.8 and 30 megahertz. I've listed them out here. I'm not going to read down all of them for you, but as you can see, we have a lot of bandwidth on HF. The amateur radio service worldwide has more bandwidth than any other single service out there. So we get a lot of bandwidth, and a lot of it is on HF. And it raises the question, why are there so many bands? And the answer to that is, from our purposes, the good news is that each HF band has particular propagation characteristics and why they're useful. Some bands are good for long range communication, some are better for shorter range communications. Some work better in the daytime and some work better at nighttime. Some work better in the wintertime and some work better in the summertime. And some of them are better at the top of the sunspot cycle, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and some are better at the bottom of the cycle. So we get a lot of benefits. Also, the different bands have different noise levels, which make them either useless or useless, depending on the time of day, time of year, and the types of QSOs and types of operating that you'll find most often in each of these bands. So we divide the HF bands into what we call the lower and the higher bands. The lower bands are 160 through 40 meters, and generally speaking, they're better in the winter than in the summertime. These are broad generalizations, but generally speaking, they're better at the bottom of the sunspot cycle, most useful at the bottom of the sunspot cycle for long distance communications. And they're better for local and regional communications in the daytime and daylight, and better for DX at night. And the upper bands, 30 through 10 meters, they're the mirror image of this. They're better in the summer than in the winter. They're better at the top of the sunspot cycle than at the bottom. They're DX day and night at the top of the cycle, and they're good for DX in the daytime, but oftentimes closed and useless at night at the bottom of the cycle. That's why we have so many bands, because we have all these variables, so there's always something you can use. Now, the HF bands, by license in the United States, this is not necessarily true worldwide, but each HF band for our purposes as US licensed amateurs is divided into frequency ranges for specific modes, license classes. Modes, CW, digital data and phone. License classes, novice technician, general, advanced, and extra. So the HF subbands, let's go through them one at a time by mode. The CW subbands, so-called, don't exist. CW is permitted on any frequency, any amateur frequency on any band at any time. But CW operating is generally found in the lower part of each band. Now, by license, by regulation, digital and data is permitted only in the lowest part of each band and generally found just above the CW section, where we find the CW operating. And phone is permitted in the upper 1/2 to 3/4 of the band, the remaining part of the band. And again, when you operate phone, single sideband, by convention, but not by regulation, lower sideband on 40 meters and below, and upper sideband above 40 meters. And again, this is not a regulation, but it's a convention. You can operate upper sideband on 40 meters if you want to, but if you call CQ on 40 meters on upper sideband, you're not likely to get too many responses, because you're going to sound like gibberish for everybody who's got their radio set for lower sideband. So how do you know which is which here? You get one of these handy dandy charts that's available by download from the ARRL. Nicely color coded, pretty clear about what you can operate where, depending on what mode you want to be in and what your license class is. And as I said, you can download this from the ARRL website. I've been licensed for all those years that you saw earlier. I still keep one of these on my desk because it helps me keep track of where other people may be operating. As an extra, I can go anywhere, but it's nice to know where other people are operating. So, for instance, in a contest environment where I want to maximize the number of people who might respond to me, I might want to be operating in the general class portion. So I want to know what those general subbands look like. Now, one thing to keep in mind if you're a newcomer and you've spent all your time on VHF, UHF repeaters, I heard you talking about your repeater system earlier. Unlike VHF and UHF, the HF bands are not channelized. There's one exception to that, which I've noted here on 60 meters. But generally speaking, other than 60 meters, not channelized. You don't have to put your VFO on a specific frequency that ends in a 5 or a 0. I always get a kick out of the situations that arise every now and again where I'll call CQ and someone will answer me and they'll say, "You're a little bit off frequency." Well, I can't be off frequency because I'm the one calling CQ and I put my radio where I want it to be. There's no channel. There's no reason for me to be in a frequency that ends in 0 or 5. He thinks that I'm off frequency because he's used to a channelized environment where you want to have your frequency readout end in a 0 or a 5. So keep in mind, HF bands are not channelized except for 60 meters. Okay, so now with all these bands and subbands, you want to be careful of band edges and subband edges, particularly in the case of when you operate phone. Now, on single sideband, the typical bandwidth of your transmission is going to be 2.5 to 3 kilohertz. So therefore, you have to stay at least 3 kilohertz away from the edge of a band or subband. So when you're operating, you have to keep in mind, if you're on lower sideband, you need to be 3 kilohertz above a band edge. And on upper sideband, you need to be 3 kilohertz below a band edge, okay? So keep this in mind. So here's how this works. The bottom of the 40-meter general phone subband is 7175. So to stay in band, you have to transmit no lower than 7178. Conversely, the top end of the 20-meter band, phone band, and the band in itself, the 20-meter band ends at 14,350. So you need to set your VFO and transmit no higher than 14,347 to maintain the fact that you're in band. This can be a problem for people. Here's an example of someone who's out of band. II2 Sierra, if you look at the readout, this is something I took off a screenshot from a contest a couple of years ago. If you look at where he is, let's see if I can get my pointer here. You can see he's got his VFO set right over here. This is 14,348. The end of the band is 14,350 over here, right? His VFO is reading something like 14,347.8 or something like that. He thinks he's inside the band, but he's not because his signal is this broad. It's 2.5 or 3 kilohertz wide. So the edge of his signal is outside 350. Now, if he's calling CQ in this contest and you're a U.S. operator, actually any operator, you shouldn't answer him because if you answer him, not only is he out of band, but you're out of band. So keep that in mind. In my misspent youth, when I first got active on HF, I wasn't aware of this. And I got a OO report, an official observer report postcard in the mail one day, and it cited me for being out of band. And the guy was nice enough to not only cite me for being out of band, but to explain why. And this is the reason why. It's bandwidth. So you got to make sure you stay away from the band edges. Okay, so let's talk about where on each band. Like I said, there are legal subband restrictions and so forth. But here's something called the Considerate Operators Frequency Guide. I've got the URL for it down at the bottom, but if you don't want to have to scribble it down while I'm talking, just put in your favorite search engine or now AI query, the Considerate Operators Frequency Guide, and you'll come up with this little chart, which shows you things like within CW, where's the DX window, or where do the QRP operators hang out, or where do you find RIDI and things like that. So this is a handy thing to have. I'll also keep a copy of this handy for myself as well. Within the digital modes, and I know, don't worry, you're not going blind. This is too small to see on your screen. This is another chart that you can download from the internet by searching for HF digital mode frequencies. And this is where the digital denizens hang out in what I call the various alphabet modes. And they all have their little spots that they like to hang out on and center their operations on. The most important one is this list, and this is for FT8. And the good news about this list is you don't even need to keep a copy of it because it's built into the FT8 software. It's automatically in there. There's a little pull down menu in STGX there's a little pull down menu for the bands. And when you pull down 80 meters, it automatically puts you on 3573, which is the most commonly used frequency for FT8 on 80 meters. This is important because I think it's safe to say that FT8 may have saved HF ham radio for a lot of people because it accounts for as much as 75 or 80% of all the casual activity on HF these days, for good or ill. So let's talk about a little bit about propagation. This is the reason we want to get on HF in the first place. It's because the characteristics of the HF bands enable us to have worldwide communication, which is not otherwise possible on the VHF and UHF bands. So we're going to talk about two different things here. Let me wipe my nose here so my allergies don't get in the way. Forgive me. HF, ground wave, and sky waves. And this is pretty much self-explanatory. Ground wave follows the contours of the ground, and sky waves go up into the sky. Why is this important? Okay. This chart is a little bit difficult to understand, but I'm going to see if I can help you with it. If I can get my pointer. Okay. Over here on this axis is the frequency in megahertz. And over here is the approximate range you can get on ground wave. So if you look at the lowest frequencies, right? This is 2 megahertz, which is just above 160 meters. And as you can see at this frequency, your ground wave can get you out maybe 100 miles. This is why AM broadcast stations can be heard so far and wide during the daytime. They operate at frequencies even below 160, right? So they can be heard a long distance away. So on 80 meters or 160 meters daytime ground wave, you can get out 80, 90, 100 miles. But as you go up in frequency, the amount of ground wave coverage you can get drops off dramatically. If you go up here to 30 megahertz or about 10 meters, you're lucky if you can get 20 miles on ground wave. So these higher frequencies that we have so much space on are not very useful for ground wave. But on the other hand, they're useful for long distance communication because of the characteristics of HF propagation. And that brings us to the layers of the ionosphere, the D, E, F1, and F2 layers. Before anybody asks at the end of this, I don't know what happened to the A, B, and C layers. I've looked on the internet, never gotten a good explanation of why we start with D layer. But what's important here is to keep in mind daylight versus nighttime, okay? The D layer is extant, exists in the daylight, and so does the E layer, okay, is primarily in the... As we get into darkness, the D layer disappears, and so does the E layer over here. And what happens is the two F layers merge, and you get a single F layer at night, okay? So keep in mind, D layer in the daylight, E layer in the daylight, and F layer in both day and night. So here's how this works. Sky waves can be refracted by the ionosphere. And basically what happens is your signal goes up into the sky. It reaches the ionosphere, which is this layer of charged particles, and those charged particles refract or bend the signal back down toward the ground. Why is this useful? Let's take a look. It's skywave refraction that gives us long distance communication, what's commonly known as skip. Now let's look at what this illustration shows us. This is a 28 megahertz wave. This is 10 meters. And if we point it straight up into the sky, it hits the F2 layer and it gets refracted, it gets bent a little bit, but it keeps going up into the sky. As we move the angle at which we aim the signal into the ionosphere, it gets bent more and more until we get to this area here, what's called the critical angle. This is what's called takeoff angle also in um, specifications for antennas. And this is why it's usually you want a low angle of radiation. You want a low critical angle, a low takeoff angle, because as you can see, if the angle is low enough, what happens is your signal reaches the ionosphere, it gets refracted, and it gets bent back down to Earth. Okay? Now remember what we saw in that graph earlier. This 28 megahertz signal, if I'm in New York City, it's never going to get me to Chicago because the curvature of the Earth is going to prevent it from reaching Chicago. My distance on 28 megahertz daylight from New York City area where I am located, it might get me out to Connecticut or northern New Jersey. Maybe if I'm lucky, out to the eastern end of Long Island, which is 110 miles from Midtown Manhattan. But using the characteristics of refraction from the F2 layer, for example, we can get a signal that goes from New York City. It gets bent here at the right angle, and may reach all the way, let's say, to Denver. Now, the other thing to bear in mind when you look at this illustration is that you'll notice that the different angles of refraction, angles of critical angles, result in different distances. So looking here, we have New York, we have Chicago, and we have Denver. And if we look at this angle, right, it takes us up into the ionosphere, it refracts us down, and we have a nice path between New York and Denver, Colorado. But what about if I want to reach Chicago? That's not going to work for us, right? We need a different angle and a different set of conditions that will give us the right angle of radiation that will get us up here and get refraction like here and then down this way. Okay? So keep that in mind. Let me get back to where we're going, okay? So keep this in mind. And this is one of the reasons that if you're not used to working HF, you have to bear in mind that you don't always hear everything that's out there, okay? If I'm in New York and I'm working this path and I'm working this station in Denver, someone else in Chicago can get onto that frequency that I'm using with this nice QSO and not hear me because I'm skipping over him. Let's call it that way, right? So now he calls CQ and he has a different angle of radiation. His angle of radiation goes this way and he also winds up in Denver. So now he's causing QRM from me in Denver, unbeknownst to the fact that I'm even on the radio, right? So I'm trying to talk to this guy in Denver, and all of a sudden, I turn it over to him, and he says, Mel, there's a station in Nineland that's on this frequency now calling CQ. He doesn't hear you. He hears me, but he doesn't hear you. So this can be an interesting situation that you have to keep in mind when you're operating HF. Now, the other thing about this is you say, Mel, okay, now this is all well and good, but Denver's not that far away. What if I want to get to someplace overseas, or what if I want to get to Europe? How does that work? Well, we get into this situation, which is multi-hop. Okay, and that's the way this works. Is if my angle of radiation from New York City area skips over Chicago but doesn't reach Denver, I can still get there because what happens is my signal goes up, gets refracted by the F2 layer, winds up back down to Earth, and gets reflected this time back up into the into a new skywave, which will make me reach Denver. So it's this multi-hop characteristic that enable us really to get worldwide communication, because single hop will not always do the job for us. Okay? Now, back to which bands when we talked about earlier. Okay? Let me get the right skywaves, distance skip, the hop, which bands when. Okay? The key role of the D layer. Now remember, I told you earlier that the D layer is extant in the daytime, and so is the E layer. So here's what happens with this. The reason lower frequencies often don't work for DX is because of delayer absorption. Let's look at this for a second again. If we're operating the lower frequency bands along the gray line, for example, over here, is what happens is the delayer kind of gets in the way of our propagation, because here's what happens. Here's an 80-meter wave. Here's something on 80 meters. You'll notice that at a lower frequency, the wave goes up, hits the delayer. Here's what happens is, and gets highly absorbed. What I like to say, and oversimplifying it, I said because it's a longer wave, it spends more time in the delayer. And because of that, what happens is some of the strength of the wave gets reduced. A higher frequency wave, let's say 10 meters, goes into that same layer of ionization in the D layer, but goes through it faster. And so there's a minimal amount of absorption. Now, bear in mind, I'm oversimplifying all of this because the study of long distance propagation could be a long presentation in and of itself. But generally speaking, it's easier to say higher ionization level means more skip, okay? Here's an example of that illustrated here. You have relatively low ionization. We have a 10-meter signal, goes up from this location here. Angle of radiation doesn't, because there's not very much ionization, doesn't get refracted much and continues on. On the other hand, a lower frequency with relatively low ionization will have more time to be refracted and get bent down to Earth. Higher with higher ionization, you get the opposite effect. What happens is the 3.5 megahertz wave gets bent down a shorter distance, and the 28 megahertz wave gets refracted less and gets skipped to a longer distance, okay? So higher ionization, higher DX at higher frequencies. For a really great Your Taxes at Work explanation of this, go onto YouTube and search the effects of the ionosphere on radio wave propagation, and you'll come up with this 1950 30-minute explanation presented by the U.S. Army. It's one of the best explanations of HF propagation I've ever seen. It's free, as I said, on YouTube. It's a half hour long. It's the best half hour you'll spend ever learning how HF propagation works. Moving along, we talked about ionization level, skywave, and sunspots. Ionization is determined by sunspot activity. And simply put, more sunspots, more ionization, more DX at higher frequencies, as we just saw. So the sunspot cycle, sunspots rise and fall in an 11-year cycle. You've probably all heard of this. This was discovered in the 1840s by Samuel Heinrich Schwab, and he retrospectively started the numbering system that we've used ever since. He started with cycle number 1. He placed it at 1755 to 1766, that 11-year cycle. So here's what 400 years of sunspot cycles look like. Schwab started his numbering system over here. This is cycle number 1. And as you can see, it's a pretty regular thing. Every 11 years, there's a rise and there's a fall, rise and a fall, rise and a fall, rise and a fall. Back sometime in the 1600s, supposedly, there were very few sunspots at all. There was a dearth of sunspots in the 1800s, the so-called Dalton minimum. That didn't seem to have too much effect on amateur radio at the time. The modern sunspot cycle maximum was cycle 19 over here in the 1950s. And you can see it's quite a bit higher than anything that preceded it or anything that's followed since, because the strength of the cycles has been declining since cycle 19. Here's again another one of these, another graphic look at this. Here's cycle 19. which is which was the best of all time. And you can see that, so, generally speaking, it's been sort of downhill ever since here. Cycle 25 that we're just completing seems to be a little bit of a step up from that, but again, not quite as good as cycle 21, 22, or 23. Cycle 25 began in December of 2019 over here, has been going up and peaked early in 2025. The best observation is that we're past the peak. We're someplace now over here in the beginning of 2026. And as the unfortunate saying goes, it's all downhill from here. There had been some hopes that this could be a what they call a twin peak cycle, where it would perk up again someplace over here, but that now seems to be a fond wish that hasn't materialized. So, knowing all this, how can we make use of this? In the modern age, we are blessed with a whole range of current technology and readings and information that's widely available on the internet to help us figure out what band conditions are like at any particular point in time. This little graphic, you can find it all over the internet. The people who run QRZ.com have it on their homepage. It's got a whole bunch of information that you can see at a glance, some of which will be Greek to you as it may be. It provides a whole lot of useful information if you delve into it. But I like to oversimplify it by looking at just a couple of these parameters in the upper left corner. This is the sunspot number, current sunspot number. That's interesting to know, but it's not all that useful on a day-to-day basis. The three numbers I look at are SFI, the solar flux index, and the A and K indexes or indices. And basically, again, to oversimplify, you can look into this more deeply on your own. To oversimplify, what you want to see is high SFI and low A and K, because high SFI is the level of ionization, and A and K are measures of absorption. So you want to see lots of high FI, lots of ionization, and low absorption. So if you keep these three numbers in mind, right, a K index of 0, a low A index below 5 is always a good thing to see. These three numbers will give you a quick look at what frequency, what band conditions look like at the moment that this is posted. Now, again, we have a lot of tools available online that will put this information to use for us, put it at our fingertips to determine what we want to do. A propagation calculator known as VOACAP, VOACAP, which was developed for the Voice of America. And this is a tool that lets you figure out specific paths. In the illustration I've given you here, I'm here in the New York City area. And let's say, for the sake of argument, I'm wondering if there's any propagation to let me reach Australia. The map I'm showing here shows day and night, right? Shows me gray line here and here. That in itself can be somewhat useful, but knowing specifically, am I likely to get a path from New York to Australia? And if I am, on what frequency? Well, down here, I plug in these parameters. I plug in where I am. I plug in where I want to go. I plug in the time of day and so forth. And over here, I get a nice color-coded readout of around the 24 hours in a day, 0-100 hours to 2,300 hours over here. And in here are each of the frequency bands. And by color, the brighter the color, it will show me how likely I am to succeed on that path. As you can see on this illustration, the paths that are available to me to Australia are pretty weak down here at the bottom. If they were bright red, I'd have a good chance of making this path. Here's another way to look at this, and this is based on the spotting networks. And this is a tool that's available on DX Maps that shows you real-time path views. This is based on what people post on the spotting networks on QSOs that they've succeeded in having or hearing. And again, you can see you put in a frequency band that you're interested in, you put in the area that you're interested in, and you plug in the parameters on this site, and it shows you where people are saying they're making those paths, right? So here in the United States, on the East Coast of the United States, on 40 meters at the time of day that this was plugged in for, you can see there's lots of domestic activity. There's a fair amount of north-south activity from the United States, trans-equatorial down to South America. There's a decent amount of activity between the United States, East Coast of the United States, and Europe. There's nothing going on from the West Coast this way, West Coast where you guys are, out to the Pacific on 40 meters at this time of day. So this is also very useful to know what's going on. Last but not least, here's my favorite thing. You turn on your radio and you look for yourself. Say, what band is active? Where am I finding activity? If your radio, as many, if not most, current HF transceivers do, have a band scope, you can take a look at what activity looks like that you can actually hear. On all of these are all what other people are hearing. This is what a calculator is telling you. This is what you can actually see and hear for yourself. So when I took this screenshot in October of 2021 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the New York area, here's what was happening on 20 meters. Okay, here's the 20-meter band. You can see the low end of 20 meters. There's lots of CW activity here. There's a good amount of phone activity here. What's this bright line here? Anybody want to guess? That's FT8. That's what you're going to see almost any time of the day or night on almost any band. The band may be completely dead oftentimes for the other modes, for phone over here and CW over here, but you're not unlikely to see a stripe over here on your band map showing that there's activity on FT8. Okay, let's talk about making contacts. This a little bit about procedures. How do you make contacts? If you're a UHF, VHF guy or gal, you know you hit your push to talk button. You say into your microphone, "This is KS2G listening." I don't know what the convention is in California. It might be saying something like monitoring and so forth. But on HF, what you do is you call CQ. You tune the band. And because of all the factors that I cited earlier, because you may not hear everything that's out there, you want to get a feel for conditions and you want to listen for a clear frequency and ask if the frequency is in use. As I pointed out earlier, there may be a conversation going on the frequency that you think is quiet, but you don't hear it because there are two people on there and one of the two you don't hear because of the skip phenomenon that I pointed out earlier. So if you ask, is the frequency in use, even though you don't hear anything, someone maybe come back and say, yes, it is. This frequency is in use. Thanks for asking. Or oftentimes, it sure is, that kind of thing. So ask if the frequency is in use. Send something like QRL on CW, see if the frequency is in use. And if the frequency isn't clear, call CQ. The art of calling CQ is making it long enough, making your CQ long enough so that someone tuning the band or looking at their band scope will notice you, but not so long that they get tired of hearing you call CQ and they want to answer you, but you don't give them a chance. So I like to do it this way, call CQ 20 meters, this KS2G, give my call phonetically, Kilo Sierra 2 Golf, KS2G, near New York City, give people an idea of where I'm calling from. Calling CQ and standing by. So it's long enough that it'll show up on someone's band scope, but it's short enough that someone has a chance to answer me. Same thing on CQ and CW or RIDI. You call CQ, you give your call sign, a note, a procedural note. Whenever you're operating on HF, your call sign goes last. Whether you're talking to another station or you're just calling CQ, your call sign goes at the end. So now that's how to call CQ. How do you respond to CQ? In casual contacts, usually on phone, what I do is I say the call sign of the station I'm trying to reach, and my call signs, W2HF, this is KS2G over. Again, on CW or URIDI, his call goes last. Now, in the case of DXpeditions, those of you who want to become DX hounds, DX pileups work a little bit differently. In responding to a DX pileup, in phone, for example, you just give your call sign, you give it phonetically. You don't have to give his call sign. He knows who he is. You just give your call sign. I just say KS2G. The question is, what frequency should you be transmitting on to respond to a DX station that's running a pileup? More than likely, almost 99.99% of the time, the DX station in a pileup is operating a split. Almost all DXpeditions, for example, operate split on phone and digital. So what does that mean? What does operating split means? Split frequency operation, it's simple. It means transmitting on one frequency and listening on another. It's like the offset in a repeater input-output situation, okay? So DXpeditions, when they're operating split, if they're good operators, they will remind people of that, because if they don't, invariably people who are not paying any attention and see them on a spotting network will just call them on their own transmitting frequency, which you don't want to do. So the DXpedition, let's say he's on phone, he'll say his call sign, he'll say listening up, or he may be more specific. He will say listening up 5 or listening up 5 to 10. So if he's listening up 5, you can bet that he's listening up 5 to 10, but he may tell you that 5 to 10 means 5 to 10 kilohertz up from his transmit frequency. So the DX station may be more specific. The DX station, let's say he's on 14160, and he'll say his call sign 200 to 225. That means he's listening 14200 to 225. So operating split is the way to go when working any kind of DXpedition. And to do that, you learn how to use your rig's dual VFOs. Again, almost all current HF rigs have dual VFOs, if not dual watch, which means two receivers. Back in the day when I started DXing, a second VFO was a fairly expensive add-on. I used I started out with a Kenwood TS520S, and the VFO 520S was a separate item outboard device that was not inexpensive to add. But if you got serious about DXing, you had to have a second VFO. A brief note about signal reports. Two things. Keep in mind when you operate VHF, UHF, and you want to know how you're doing, you'll usually ask someone, say, how am I making it into the repeater? And the response will be, well, you're full quieting, or you're a little bit noisy, or if it's digital, it means you won't making it at all. On HF, we use the RST system, R for readability, S for signal strength, and T for tone. Readability on a scale of 1 to 5, starting from I can't hear you at all to 5, I hear you perfectly readable, and signal strength from faint to extremely strong. And tone refers to CW only. This is a throwback to days when spectral purity was not what it should be in commercial and homebrew equipment, and this was a function of how pure a CW tone you had. These days, almost everybody is 9. Most of the commercial radios, unless they're having some kind of alignment problem or something, are 9. But the peculiarity of the RST system is readability and signal strength are not the same thing. You can be 5 by 1. In other words, when the band is quiet, there's no local noise, and there's a signal that he's barely there, but you can hear him perfectly well. So 5 by 1 is a perfectly appropriate signal report. Now, all this being said, if you're in a contest or if you're operating against a DX pileup, everyone you hear is 5.9. Okay? Okay, speaking of working contests, one of my favorite activities. People who get into HF oftentimes decide they want to do contesting and or come across contesting. Contesting is competitive operating. The idea is to work as many stations as possible and as many places as possible, as quickly as possible. If you want to operate in a contest, you check the contest rules for the contest exchange so you know what information to give in the contest. If you want to know what contests are on, there's a website called contestcalendar.com that shows you what contests are on any particular day or time or weekend or something. And when you operate contests, you can do two things. You can run, you can call CQ, or you can search and pounce. You can tune the band and respond to stations that are calling CQ. And if you want to know a whole lot about contesting, invite me back for another visit, and I'll give you my spiel about contest operating. A brief word about logging. For U.S. amateurs, there is no longer a legal requirement to keep a detailed log. There has not been since 1983. But it's useful to keep a record of activity and information required for QSLs to get confirmations. So you want to keep a log that gives you the date and time in UTC, not in local time, date and time both in UTC, the frequency band that you're on and the mode that you're on, the call sign that you worked. You may want to include a signal report in the log that you keep, and any kind of notes about equipment that you used, equipment that he used, any kind of information that may be of note that you may run across him again and want to be able to cite that you worked previously. So logging, you can do it two ways. You can do it old school on paper. Yes, the ARRL still sells paper logbooks if you want to do that. There's computer logging, which is the way to go. There are two general types of computer logs. There are general purpose loggers. I've listed a few of the most popular ones here. DX Lab is very popular, DX for Win, DX Keeper. Those of you who are in the Mac and Linux world, there are logging programs for you as well. And there are specialized contest loggers that are tailored to contest operating. The most popular one right now is N1MM Plus. That's a Windows program. WriteLog is a commercial program that's similar to N1MM Plus. And again, the Mac and Linux worlds have their own. Okay. QSLing. You can get QSL cards directly by sending cards out. If you send cards domestically, it's a good courtesy to send a self-addressed stamped envelope. It's a good idea if you're going to be QSLing directly to go to the station you're interested in, go to their QRZ page. They will oftentimes tell you what their QSL preferences are. If you want to QSL direct with overseas stations, you may want to include a few dollars in the envelope. If you do that, if you do overseas QSLing, do not put any indication on the envelope, either in his address or your address, that denote amateur radio. Postal authorities in a lot of countries understand amateur radio. They understand that people send money for QSL cards. If they see an envelope that looks like it's for a ham radio, they are not unlikely to open it up, take out the money, and throw the envelope away. So not only do you lose your money, but you'll never get your QSL card back. The QSL managers used to be very popular in years past, less so now because of electronic QSLing. But these are stateside operators who manage the logs of overseas operators. So if you want the QSL card from the overseas operator, you send your card to the domestic QSL manager, which saves you a lot of postage. You don't have to have any overseas postage, and he sends you back the QSL cards based on the log that he receives from the station that he's managing. QSL bureaus. ARRL is an outgoing QSL service, which can save you a lot of postage in terms of outgoing cards. You bundle them up and send them off to Newington, Connecticut, and they send them out in bulk. For incoming cards, you can use the 6th District Incoming QSL Bureau. That bureau operates the way most of them do these days, from what I saw on their website. You send them some money, they give you what they call return envelope credits, and as cards come in for you, they aggregate them and they send them out in little packages for you. The most common thing these days is electronic QSLing, and the most common system for doing that is the ARRL Logbook of the World, LOTW. It's open to all. You don't need to be an ARRL member to use Logbook of the World. You do need to be a member to apply for awards through a Logbook of the World. And again, forgive me, my allergies are acting up. EQSL, I'm not a big fan of it. A lot of people use it. ClubLog is a system that's used by a lot of DX operators. And QRZ.com has its own version of Logbook of the World. It has a QRZ logbook that a lot of people like to use these days. And the reason for logging and QSLing is to qualify for awards. A whole raft of them are available. Worked all states, 5-band worked all states, DXCC for 100 countries, worked all continents. Lots of awards out there for you to go after if you're an HF operator. So let's talk briefly about getting the most out of your HF transceiver. HF radios are a lot more complicated to operate than VHF UHF radios. VHF UHF radios usually have just a handful of controls: volume control, squelch control, push to talk. Not much more beyond that. So let's take a look at how to get the most out of your HF transceiver by going through the different kinds of controls. For transmitter controls, there's RF power output for CW digital and sideband. That obviously determines either through a knob or a menu setting the amount of RF power that your radio will put out. Most HF transceivers nowadays are 100 watts output maximum, and you can dial them back down for a variety of reasons. When you work digital, you may want to work at a lower than maximum 100-watt frequency. The mic level, again, on a handy talkie or on a VHF UHF mobile radio, the mic level is usually preset inside the radio. But on an HF radio, you may be using a variety of different microphones, and therefore that the microphone level will vary depending on what microphone you're using and what your voice characteristics are. So you have microphone level, and then you have the tailoring of the audio, which speech processing, also known as compression, which increases the average RF power and adds punch to the audio. I'm going to explain how that works in just a little bit. And when you set the audio level with the speech processor, you want to observe what's called the ALC, or automatic level control limit on your radio, which also can be varied. You may have a radio that has transmit audio equalization, like in the world of hi-fi. Equalization lets you emphasize or de-emphasize the highs and lows for maximum intelligibility. And if your radio has a transmit audio monitor, the good thing is you can listen to yourself without being on the air and set all these parameters to get the best possible, most intelligible and most pleasant to listen to audio. Last but not least, whatever you do, as you play with your audio controls, as you go through time, you ask the stations that you work what your audio sounds like, so that you can maximize the use of the controls that you have at your disposal to get the audio output that you want. Now, let's take a look about what we call speech processing or speech compression. And let me see again if I can find my mouse here for a second again. Hold on, here we go. All right, so without processing, the way a single sideband works, unlike AM or FM, for example, A or FM, you have a single carrier level, and the modulation is put over the carrier. The the way it works with single sideband is the amount of power output, the amount of drive for your radio, in other words, the number of watts you put out is characteristic of your voice characteristics. So what happens as you speak, right? The radio puts out sort of this amount of power, and it puts out more power on the peaks over here. It puts out peak envelope power, PEP, peak envelope power here. And as you can see, without processing, most of your voice power is in this range of frequencies, and the peaks are over here. So basically, even though you have these peaks here, the amount of power your radio puts out is based on this parameter over here. What happens in processing, what I like to say is, what processing does is it squeezes down the peaks over here and it boosts up the mid-range over here. So what happens is, instead of wasting your power on peaks, they get compressed down and pushed back into your average, so you get a better amount of audio output, so that you're driving your radio more efficiently and getting the maximum RF power output based on your sideband. Okay. All right, let's move on. Transmitter keying controls, different ways to turn your transmitter on and off. Voice-operated transmit, known as Vox. The transmitter is keyed by sensing speech. So when you talk into the microphone, that's what keys the radio, and when that happens is based on a sensitivity level that's set in your radio for Vox. How much time the radio stays in transmit after you stop talking, and then anti-Vox, which is a setting that determines that you don't trip the radio when you don't intend to, based on room noise and so forth. On CW, there's CW break-in. CW break-in is automatic switching between transmit and receive, and there's two kinds of CW break-in. Full break-in switches from transmit to receive immediately when your key contacts are open. QSK or full break-in lets you hear what the receiver is hearing in between transmit elements. Semi break-in is when the key contact's open, the switch to receive is delayed by a set duration, usually measured in milliseconds, and it's usually controlled by the Vox setting. So if you want full break-in, people who are skilled at using full break-in can actually have conversations that are almost like telephone duplex, but in CW. Let's talk about getting the most out of your transmitter with the automatic antenna tuner. Okay, the automatic antenna tuner automatically matches out of resonant antenna impedance to 50 ohms. The modern radios that have transistorized finals want to see a 50 ohm antenna output. And when they don't, what happens is they fold back. The more out of range of 50 ohms that the antenna presents to the back of your radio, they reduce the power output of the radio accordingly, so you don't damage the final output transistors. So an automatic antenna tuner lets you basically press a button, and through a series of relays and other devices inside your radio will match the antenna output to make it look like 50 ohms to your transmitter, so that you can put out full output. Now let's go on to the receive side. There's a lot of things you can do on receiver. AF gain, that's basically a volume control. RF gain it manually adjusts the receiver sensitivity of your radio. Again, you don't usually have something like this on a handy talkie or on a VHF, UHF radio. And this can be useful for managing the amount of atmospheric or other noise that's available. So most of the time, most people usually leave the RF gain set to maximum, and they use this next feature, the automatic gain control, to be sure that the incoming signals are handled appropriately. Automatic gain control adjusts the receiver sensitivity in response to changes in the signal strength. You set it to fast for CW, and you set it for slow for foam, for single sideband. Receiver sensitivity controls, again, these don't usually exist in the VHF, UHF world. The RF attenuator reduces your receiver sensitivity by a set amount, usually by a knob or a set of buttons or menu settings. An RF preamp does the reverse. It increases receiver sensitivity by a set amount, and by balancing RF attenuation and RF preamplitude, you can manage to get the best possible readability of a signal depending on what other factors are causing difficulties like ambient noise and things like that.
Hey,
A lot of
Mel,
radio,
sorry to-
HF radio.
Sorry
I'm
to
sorry?
interrupt. Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. This is Joe, K6JPE. About how much longer do you have? We lose the space here in a matter of minutes.
I'm one slide away.
Oh, okay,
Two
great.
slides away.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. So finally, squelch control mutes the receiver when there's no signal present, leaves wide open if not. Let's get down to receiver tuning controls. RIT clarifies a clarifier on a AC radio, changes the frequency without changing the transmit frequency. XIT is the reverse of that. And interference controls. Here are the big ones. Noise filter. Noise reduction reduces steady background noise. Noise blanker reduces pulsating background noise. And the notch filter, this is useful for getting rid of heterodynes. If you're operating phone, someone's tuning up. What will happen is the notch filter will create this little valley in times of your bandpass to null out the signal. And bandwidth controls IF shifts the center frequency. This is a way of if you look on the right-hand side, the dotted line, that's your bandpass. The interfering signal is in the middle of your bandpass. You can move your bandpass to keep the desired signal inside the bandpass, and the interfering signal gets moved outside. And then there's narrow and DSP filters, which do the same kind of thing. You can see in the illustration when with a wide bandpass, you may have your operating CW and there are two signals right next to each other interfering with you, and you can pop in a narrow DSP or roofing filter with a fixed bandwidth and get rid of those signals. And then there's a mix and match version of that, which is variable bandwidth filters for phone signals. So that's basically what I've got to say. I'll just remind you, you can find this slide deck if you liked it and you want to refer to it. You can go to the HRU website, hamradiouniversity.org. I'd urge you to visit and subscribe to the HRU channel on YouTube. Got a lot of good presentations, both live and slide presentations there as well. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Just email me, ks2g@arrl.net. And I thank you for your time and having me out there. Okay. I don't know if we have time for any questions or not.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get some questions. Are there any questions here in the room? Questions? Any questions from those online? But Mark has a comment. Oh, yes. It's midnight. Thank you for staying up so late. Right? It's midnight for you?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Get some sleep. True DXer.
I'm a night as a DXer and contester. I'm a night owl anyway.
Yeah.
This is not too late past my bedtime.
Not too late. Not too late past the bedtime. Good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Happy to do it. And like I said, if you have any questions after the fact, just feel free to email me, ks2g@arrl.net. Always happy to do it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Good night,
Quick
everybody.
announcements. Yuma Ham Fest coming up the last weekend of the month. So I know a couple of people are headed out that direction. What? Okay. I know a couple of people are headed out that direction. So see if you can maybe arrange some meetups there. And Chris.
I wish I'd have said this earlier when before everybody left. Vintage Computer Festival, Southern California, is coming up the weekend after next. That's the 14th and 15th. Full disclaimer, I have no involvement with this event. I've never been to it before, but everyone I've spoken to and all the videos I've seen say that it is absolutely an obscene good time. So, right. Consignment items, everything. So if you're interested in retro computing, which is really hot right now, Vintage Computer Festival West it's in Orange, City of Orange. So it's not that far away. Just Google VCF SoCal. Tickets are, I think, Henry, $25 for the day or something. It's a 2-day event. You can go one day or whatever. Yeah. So if you're into that sort of thing, I'm going. I don't know if Mark's going. I know Henry's going. There'll be a PARC contingent up there. Bring your HTs, geek out. Let's make a ham radio presence at this thing, but it's going to be pretty cool. Thanks. Over and out.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, everybody, for coming. And we will see you next month in this room, we think. 7-3 and good night. Let me